The gateway theory.
Is marijuana a gateway drug?
Yes, I think it is.
You haven't...
I don't exactly know why, but I know it is.
It opens a doorway to other drugs.
It makes you want to experience more.
It makes you feel good.
Yeah.
People want to experience something else and, you know, have a, I guess, more dreams.
Its greatest danger lies in the fact that it is a stepping stone to the harder drugs, such as morphine and heroin.
That's why there are people that want to legalize marijuana. They figure if they can get the young people in this country onto hard drugs, they can destroy your generation, or in this generation.
You know, in the days of Harry Anslinger, it was called the stepping stone hypothesis. If you stepped on this stone, marijuana, you were bound and determined to go on to the next stone, which would be one of the so-called hard drugs.
Every time it's been studied and looked at and so on, they have never, ever found that there's certainly nothing in marijuana that makes you want to go to anything else.
There is no inherent psychopharmacological property of the drug which pushes one toward another drug.
I'll smoke a joint. I want a bag of chips and fucking junk food. I don't want to go out and get ripped.
I drink alcohol. That's my drug of choice. It could be said I started on milk. I mean, this is crazy. If I use marijuana, why does that automatically make me a candidate to black tar heroin? It's a nonsensical argument.
In fact, only 1 out of every 104 marijuana users use cocaine, and less than 1 use heroin.
The black market throws the dealers of soft drugs together with the dealer of hard drugs.
So if you have a black market and you have a dealer that's dealing in marijuana and LSD and everything else, and the dealer might say to you, hey, you want to try something stronger? Well, in that sense, because of the black market, because of prohibition, people may be more susceptible to seeing these other drugs and being willing to try these other drugs.
And so what you see is that there is a gateway effect. But it's a gateway effect caused by prohibition and the blending of the hard and soft drug markets.
Where does this leave us? Oh, wait. What about laziness? You will be useless to society if you use marijuana. But if that's true, well, there are about 50 million people who smoke marijuana in America, and over half of the Canadian population who've tried it. And yet, both societies seem to flourish. And just look who some of these people are.
Stephen Jobs developed Apple Computer smoking pot. Ted Turner developed CNN News smoking pot. Still smokes a joint every day. You go through every musician you like, from the Rolling Stones to the Beatles to Led Zeppelin, they all smoke pot.
Snoop Dogg, Willie Nelson.
Come on, Bill Clinton,
He didn't inhale, man.
He didn't inhale. Don't be so naive.
Virtually every presidential candidate has now copped to using marijuana at some time in his or her life.
A few times in the Army, I tried marijuana. It was not a significant part of my life.
I had a senior law enforcement official tell me that in his judgment, up to a quarter of the White House staff when they first came in had used drugs in the last 4 or 5 years.
The people that have personality problems and the people that are going to be lazy and going to lose their job, they're going to lose their job anyway. They're not losing their job because of marijuana. That's just a lie.
I love Tommy Chong. I think that a lot of the Cheech and Chong episodes that people believed, not knowing that Tommy wrote and directed the movies, thinking that, you know, that's what a stupid stoner looks like. No, actually, that's what a really brilliant creative genius looks like, acting like somebody you think's a stoner.
And none of this is borne out in the research or when you look at people who are long-term users and happen to be lawyers, judges, doctors, and, you know, writers.
But what about the potency of the drug?
Marijuana is dangerous. There's higher THC levels than ever before.
Anytime you got a bag of Colombian dope 20 years ago, it was way better than the Mexican swag that you normally got. So there's always been a range of THC in plants, and the fact that we can now grow stuff that's equivalent of what Colombian was 20 years, well, it doesn't mean that we're boosting THC to unheard of levels. It just means, you know, hi, there are some nuances in this discussion that people should be aware of.
And I actually think that it's a real stroke of our own ego to think that for the 50 or so years of prohibition that we've improved upon varieties that have been cultivated for drug use in places like India and such for thousands of years.
People say, well, you can abuse marijuana. Well, shit, you can abuse cheeseburgers too. You know, you don't go around closing Burger King because you can abuse something. I can take a fucking fork and jam it in my eyeballs. That mean forks should be illegal? You know, I could jump off a bridge. Should we outlaw bridges? Let's nerf the world.
But what about all the crime and violence associated with marijuana?
From beat cop to police chief, I saw ample evidence of the harm caused by alcohol and the absence of evidence caused by marijuana use. And I mean the complete absence. I cannot recall a single case in which marijuana contributed to domestic violence, crimes of theft, and the like.
You want to know what a weed smoker looks like? You're staring at one. You know, like, I'm a weed smoker. I'm not, like, crazy or, you know, I'm not stabbing you right now.
Most of the violent crime that's committed, or most of the crime period that's committed or having to do with drugs, is people who are on drugs committing violent crimes. If you make it legal, if you make it cheaper, you make it more available, you're going to have more violence, more addiction,
Tom, that is
more
not
crime.
true. Stop lying to us.
Oh, now come on.
Stop lying to us. That is not true. You know, don't tell me that. I've smoked pot, Tom.
But
I've admitted it. I've done it. I've done all of the big three. I've done tobacco, I've done alcohol, and I've done marijuana, Tom. Guess what? Marijuana's the least of the three, pal.
You guys prove me wrong or whatever. I want to hear someone that has smoked too much weed and went home and beat his wife and beat his children or whatever like you see on booze.
The only big issue on alcohol is drunken driving and binge drinking among college students. Otherwise, you can drink to your heart's content.
There are far more crimes committed under the influence of unadulterated, if you will, emotions. Anger, rage, jealousy.
A lot of our understanding is driven by what's in the paper and on the television and the radio these days, and we get extremes, and the black and white thinking is reinforced, I think, by that.
If only there was something to compare it to. Something that was prohibited at one time but is now regulated. So we could see what the difference might be. What could that be? What could that be?
Under prohibition of alcohol, everything got worse. Everything.
Alcohol prohibition really birthed and gave rise to massive organized criminal groups within the United States. It led to a general disregard for the law and a general disregard for police activity because it was a law that most people didn't obey.
Would you have supported the prohibition of alcohol 75 years ago?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the alcohol example. I mean, as a governor, you must have known firsthand the cost of alcohol. I hear this argument a lot of times, like alcohol.
That isn't what I asked you, Tom. I asked you a specific question. Don't give me spin. I said, would you have supported the prohibition of alcohol 75 years ago?
I don't think I would have.
Why?
Because alcohol, for better or worse, and a lot of times for worse, it's a close call, is a long entrenched and ingrained part of our culture and our society. I mean, you go back thousands of years, the first writing is about alcohol, the Bible, everything else. It's really hard to reach in
Tom, wait
and
a
pull
minute.
this out of society.
Let me inject something then. If you believe that God also made the marijuana plant,
about society. I'm talking about our culture and our society.
You just said the Bible.
Alcohol poisoning went up by 600% during Prohibition. There were more speakeasies in large cities like New York City under Prohibition than there are taverns and liquor stores today.
Sure, one can point to alcohol as being a continuing social problem, but we don't have people shooting each other over alcohol.
When alcohol was prohibited, people lived at that time to know the difference between prohibition and non-prohibition. They could see that the prohibition of alcohol caused the emergence of gangsters in the underworld that took control of these substances. Alcohol then was no longer in their control.
Could this be the same for marijuana?